Hello and welcome to the fourth class. You've been practicing for a little while by now, so I'm not going to spoon feed you stuff you should already know. So what I want you to do at the beginning of this class is to take, shall we say, 15 minutes, and in that time I want you to warm yourself up, I want you to go through the 4 guards drill, I want you to go through the up, down, around sword handling drill, and part 1 of the cutting drill. Okay? So it's absolutely fresh in your head and fresh in your body before we move on. Okay, off you go. And welcome back. Now, let us continue with the 6 grips of the sword. Now, this comes from this page in Fury's book, where at the top we have some details of footwork, very useful. Then we have these 2 versions of posta di donna. And let me just explain what they are. Okay? We have a forward-weighted version, and on this side of the page we have a rear-weighted version. Okay? And the primary difference between them, at least from the chest down, is a volta stabile. Rear-weighted, my opponent's over there. Forward-weighted, my opponent is still over there. Okay? Forward-weighted position allows me to get forward more quickly. Rear-weighted position means that my opponent has to get closer, has to travel further to get to me because my head is that much further away from him. Okay? So, it's as well to remember that Fiore says that all the guards can do volta stabile and mezza volta. Okay? So your posta di donna, forward-weighted, posta di donna rear-weighted, and it's also shown like this where you're looking out under your arm. We're not going to use that on this course terribly much, but you should know that it exists. Now, next up, we have these 2 figures and the 4 figures that come after them. And here, Fiore says that we are 6 guards and we're not like each other. And what these guards show is different ways of holding the sword. The first one shows this, which is for throwing the sword like a javelin. Okay? We're not going to be covering that on this course either, I'm afraid, but you should know that the sword can be held this way around, and you should realize if somebody's holding a sword like this, they are probably about to throw it. So, the sword held for throwing, then the sword in one hand. The sword in one hand, we're going to be covering that in the 7th class, but it's basically a way of holding the sword in just one hand, obviously, but from here, the actions you do are really specific, so we're not going to go into them right now, we're going to leave that for their later section. If we turn the page, from the sword in one hand, we get to the right hand on the pommel for making, I'll show you if I can move back a little bit, the right hand on the pommel for making an extra long thrust. Okay? Boom. For catching people by surprise. Okay? After that, we have this grip with the left hand gripping the sword by the middle, which is sword in armor for using, parrying between the hands, which you do in armor, generally speaking. Okay? From here, we have the next one, which is our friend posta di donna, held normally. And lastly, he shows a boar sword held in a rear-weighted posta di donna. So what this tells us, and let's not go into what the boar sword is used for in this art just yet because it's rather peripheral, but the important thing here is to notice that we have these different ways of holding the sword. Reverse for throwing, sword in one hand on the pommel for a long thrust, sword in armor, held like a normal person, and held it like it was an axe. Okay? So, this means, of course, that we need to be able to shift between these things, and of course we have a drill for this, and this is one of the sword handling drills, and it starts by simply holding the sword like a normal person, do this with me, and placing the middle of the blade in your left hand. Hand to pommel. Now, to start with, the left hand stays still, and you place the pommel in your left hand, and the blade in your left hand. The pommel in your left hand, and the blade in your left hand. And you should do this without looking. Okay? Now from here, shift the right hand to the pommel, and you can thrust. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now, we haven't got to this one yet. We've kind of skipped over it. Don't worry, it's coming. But for now, held like a normal person, held sword in armor, held by the pommel, and there we go. And just for fun, do it left-handed too. Most people find this kind of weird, except for the left-handers, obviously. Left-handers, of course, I need you to go right-handed, and then you'll see what I mean. Oops, now I've switched back again, haven't I? There you go. Okay, so play with that. We have a little exercise for getting into this position, okay? And this is very much not Fiore, this is very much Guy making stuff up to make his students' lives interesting and to develop certain skills. So, what you do, thumb comes up, goes around the back of the blade, drop the blade, and the sword is now hanging on, the cross guard is hanging on the thumb, fingers go around, and there you are. If you take the thumb back across, you're in the throwing position, okay? But what we tend to do is leave out that last bit and just go all the way around and all the way back, all the way around and all the way back, all the way around and all the way back, okay? Now comes the really fun bit. When it's upside down, pass it behind your back, same thing on the other side. Yeah. One side, dun, dun. Okay, now we put it all together. And you play with it. The exercise is to play with it. So the sword becomes something that you naturally have control over without thinking at all about guards or blows or any of that stuff. Okay, and remember where this comes from. It comes from those 6 ways of holding the sword that Fiore showed us. To throw, sword in one hand, long thrust, sword in armor, hold it like a normal person, hold it like an axe murderer. Okay. Practice this, have fun with it, and come back when you're ready. Welcome back. Now, let's have a look at the 7 blows of the sword. Fiore gives us, on this page here, 7 blows of the sword, which are the fendenti blows, descending, the sottani blows, which return by the path that the fendente make, the mezzani blows, which go across, true edge from the right, false edge from the left, and the thrust, which goes straight up the middle. However, he also says that there are 5 types of thrust: descending from either side, ascending from either side, and straight up the middle. So there are actually 11 blows, but 7 is an easier number to remember. So what I want you to do now is we're going to go through each of those 7 blows in order. So you have the 6 cuts, and we'll name them as we go through them, and then the 5 thrusts, and we'll name them as we go through them. And I want you just to file that away as necessary reference points but don't worry too much about them. So, if we start imposted on the right, we have Madrido Fendente. Donna on the left, we have Reverso Fendente. I'll do this again with the left hand for the left-handers, the whole thing left-handed. So left-handers, just hold your horses for a moment. So right-handers, Madrido Fendente, Reverso Fendente. Okay? Step as you please. I'm not too worried about it at this stage. Now, striking up from below, from the mandrito side, can be done with the false edge, cutting up. So this is mandrito sottano, forehand rising blow. Okay? But it can also be done with the true edge. And from the left, Reverso, backhand with the false edge, as you've already done as a parry. And it can be done with the true edge, generally with one hand. Okay, but if you need to do it with two, there it is. Again, I'm not worried about the tactical implications of this or the specific technical details that make them work particularly well. I just want you to get an idea of what the names are, what the lines are, and how they work. Now, the lines are important, and Fiore specifies them. The fendente breaks the teeth, exits at the knee, leaving a bloody trail. So the line is jaw to knee. Jaw to knee. Okay? So as you're making your strike, jaw to knee, and he says the sottani return by the path the fendente make. It's the same path. Okay? And on the other side, same path, jaw to knee. Okay? Now, the mezzani blows are usually done from below, not always, but the easiest place to start is with this sort of windscreen wiper motion, where if you start in, for example, denti shingaro, and you slice across with the false edge and slice across with the true edge. See how the sword is not twisting, it's just staying this way up. Boom, boom. And again, don't worry about technique at this stage. Obviously, you wouldn't want to end up in this position, but just in a relaxed and comfortable way, false edge across the throat from the left, true edge across the throat from the right. Reverso with the false edge, mandrito with the true edge. Nice and relaxed, nice and easy. Okay, now the 6 cuts that we've just done, I'll do them left-handed for you. Remember the path, jaw to knee, mandrito fendente, reverso sottano, mandrito fendente, reverso sottano, reverso fendente, mandrito sottano, reverso fendente, mandrito sottano. And of course, the sottani blows can be done with the true edge. So, mandrito sottano with the true edge, reverso sottano with the true edge. This is actually quite a nice little drill that you can throw in at any time. True edge, sottani, true edge, sottani. Okay, and the mezzani blows, as a left-hander, still it's true edge, mandrito, false edge, reversal, across the throat. And there are many other ways of doing this. Yes, of course you can do a true edge mezzano from the reversal side if you must, and you can throw a false edge from there. And you can do it true edge this way around. But by all means play with it. They're not commonly used as big direct attacks from out of measure because they're vulnerable to all sorts of things. We'll get onto that later. Okay, so just run through those 6 cuts to make sure they're comfortable, and then we'll have a look at the 5 thrusts. The sword held in one hand, just for fun. I want you to thrust up from the right, up from the left, down from the right, down from the left, and straight up the middle. So up from the right, up from the left, down from the right, down from the left, and straight up the middle. And for left-handers, of course, it's exactly the same. And just for fun. So those are the 7 blows of the sword, technically the 11 blows of the sword, and if you include the sultani twice because there's true edge and false edge, then you've got the 13 blows of the sword, but that's not a good memory number. 7 is a much better number for organizing these things by. Now then, the 12 guards of the sword. The 7 blows create the 12 guards. And the guards that Fiore shows us, I'll stick with the order shown in the Getty. It's a little bit different in the other 3 manuscripts. Don't worry about it. It's perfectly right to stick with this one for now. The order of the guards are to the Porta di Ferro, which you already know, postulated on the right, shown rear-weighted. Okay, you know those 2, so start with those. To the Porta di Ferro, postulated on the rear-weighted. And of course, you can look out from under your elbow if you want. Okay? Then we have fenestra. And fenestra you haven't seen yet, so I'll go into it, into a little bit of detail with it. Fenestra, you can think of it as being created by a true edge reverso sultano, because where you end up is here. Okay? So rear weighted, edge up, and here. Okay? Now there are lots of ways to get into it. One is to simply sweep into it from one side. Some people find that easy. Another is to go to posta longa, left foot forward, and volta stabile back into it. Okay? Another is to go into posta longa facing in this direction, which is 135 degrees around. Okay? Look over your shoulder, so that's front, and pop the sword over. There's fenestra again. I don't mind how you get into it, but what I want is for you to be relaxed and comfortable in this position. Okay? And if you've been practicing your up, down, around drill, you've already found another way of getting into fenestra. Okay? Now, next up in the Getty manuscript is posted on the left. So we've had it here already in the cutting drill. Volta stabile, and you're here. Okay? And from here, of course, you can do all the things you could do from the forward weighted position, but the tactical situation is a little bit different, and the mechanics are a little bit different. Don't worry about it at this stage. Just think to yourself, Donna on the left. Got that. Now, next up, the 5th guard, posta longa. You know this one already. You've got into it with a mandrillo fendente, you got into it with a reverso fendente, you got into it with a thrust from below, from the right and from the left. Okay? And recently, you also got into it with a sultano. So, posta longa is the most commonly used moment of extension, the guard you're in at the moment that you make contact with the opponent. Now, next up is Porta di Ferro la mezzana, which is, as with this to the Porta di Ferro, the whole iron door, this is the middle iron door, where it's held in the midline of the body and you're sitting kind of on top of the sword. Easiest thing to do from here is to thrust. Okay? And you could create it if you wanted with a fendente, but be very careful you don't have a little accident. Trust me, people have done this in the past. So you're sitting on top of the sword here, Porta di Ferro la mezzana. We don't use this guard that much for reasons that will become apparent later. Okay, next up is posta breve, which is like porta di ferro alla mezzana, only the point is up. And it's the short guard, and it's used, he says, for circling around an opponent looking for an opening when you're in armour. So we don't use that one very much either. Okay? And last up on this page, we have dente di cinghiaro, the boar's tooth, which you already know. And from here, you know to thrust, and you know to parry and strike. And you normally create it with a mandrello fendente. So, that's the first 8. The last 4, you know one of them already, coda longa, which is the end point of a really enthusiastic reverso fendente. Okay? Then we have posta di bicorno. Now, bicorno is a bit different, and there are some variant interpretations of this. The way I do it, and have done it for years, is I take a posta longa and I coil it into my grip like this. And what this does is it changes the effective ground path. Now, let me go into that into a little bit of detail. So if I could borrow you, please. Now, this is something you can certainly do with your partner. Okay, if I'm in posta longa, I should be striking with the edge or with the point. Okay, so my ground path should support the edge or the point. So what I want you to do, Zoe, is just check the ground path for the point. No. You stand inside it and you have it here. So if it slips, it doesn't go into your face. You've done this a million times, Zoe, come on. Okay, so that's it. So Zoe gives me a little bit of pressure, and I check that that is properly supported. Yep, that feels pretty good. Okay, now, when I strike the target strikes back. So we need to test with a finger under the true edge to see whether that is properly supported. Bit of pressure, a bit more. Okay, now as she does that, I can feel that this pressure is increasing the pressure here between this knuckle and the handle of the sword. Okay, which means that that pressure, go ahead, has a route into my body which can guide it down into the ground. Okay, so posta longa is supported in the edge and is supported in the point. What happens when I turn that grip around and I turn this around and I tuck my elbows in? What happens to the point? Rock solid. What happens to the edge? No support there at all. But what happens to the flat? It's suddenly stable. Okay? Whereas posta longa, if you push the flat, the sword is pushed out of the way. In bicorno, the flats are supported because I've shifted my point of contact with the sword from behind the edge to behind the flat. Okay? So bicorno is closed, so as Fiore says, the point always stays in the middle of the way. So it's difficult for your opponent to push it out of the way with their blade, and of course it's also easy, because the edges are not supported, it's easy for you to fiddle your point about. Okay? We'll get on to some tactical applications of bicorno later on, but for now just file it away as interesting but not useful yet. Okay, next up, thank you Zoe. Next up we have frontale, and you've already done frontale because if you strike a mandrillo sottano with a true edge from tutto porta di ferro against the middle of your opponent's sword, you're going to end up in this position. And this is frontale, which is also called corona, the crown guard, and it is, as Fiore says, good for crossing, and it is mostly used at the moment of a parry. Okay? And it's created usually by a mandrillo sottano. Of course, I'll go over the whole thing left-handed in a moment. And lastly, the last guard that Fiore shows in the Getty manuscript is dente di cinghiaro held rear-weighted, which is exactly the same as the forward-weighted version, only there's a volta stabile. And that places the sword in the middle of my body relative to you, whereas before it was clearly to the left. And it's not actually the sword that's moved terribly much, maybe this much, It's the body that's done most of the moving. Okay? So those are the 12 guards of the sword. Left-handed, we have Tudo porta di ferro, posta di donna rear weighted, posta di finestra, posta di donna la sinistra, rear weighted, posta longa, porta di ferro la mezzana, posta breve, dente di cinghiaro, coda longa, bicornal. Okay? Again, I don't think at this stage it's necessary for you to memorize them as a list, but I want you to have been in them, I want you to recognize them when you see them, and I want you to be comfortable with the idea that it's motions that create the guards. Guards do not win sword fights. Blows win sword fights. Blows create guards. Guards are the guards are the beginning, the middle, and the end of blows, but the point is to strike, not to stand beautifully in guard. One thing you're going to notice is we're going to keep coming back to the same set of basic actions. This is normal. Martial arts practice works as a spiral. You start at the beginning, and you progress and you progress and you progress until you find yourself back at the beginning, but at a higher level. And that just keeps going on forever and ever and ever. And so after 20 years of practice, you find yourself back at the beginning, but at a very different type of beginning to where you started. So it is worth revisiting the basic actions over and over again. Now, what we're about to have a look at are two of the foundational drills for the syllabus, which are first drill and second drill, and we'll take them in order. First drill begins with a parry from the right, but the attack is at least as important as the parry. And the thing to remember is you should always train from as early as possible, you should train to keep moving. So from now on, the first step of every drill will be the attacker entering with multiple strikes. Okay? Now we keep this as simple as possible at the beginning, but the concept is always there. So the attack is going to be a fendente to the head and a thrust to the body while stepping out of the way. Watch. So, please. So we salute. So he stands on guard, and I will show you the attack. So I come to strike with a mandrilla fendente. She does nothing because she's just being my assistant at this point. And then I stab her in the guts, and then I get out of the way. So it's 1, 2, and out. 1, 2, and out. Because we do not want to get you into the habit of striking and stopping. You strike, you get out of the way. Strike and get out of the way. So, I'm leaving my mask off, which is very naughty. I would like you to practice this with masks on, please, but I'm leaving it off so I can talk to you. So, Zoe comes to strike with a mandrilla fendente to my head and a thrust to the guts. Go ahead. That's it. Now, obviously, I need to deal with the first of those. So as she comes to strike, I parry and strike. Okay? And again. Okay? So, step 1. Step 2. Okay? And from the other side. Step 1. Step 2. Okay, now practice that, and when you're comfortable with it, come back. Welcome back. Now, let's have a look at what I should do if Zoe parries. So we'll go through the drill, step 1, step 2, and then on step 3, I will show you what you should do. And this comes from, I can't resist, the first action, the parry and strike, comes from the first 2 plays of the Zogo Largo. We'll go into that in detail later. The counter comes from the mounted combat section, where in the 8th play of the Master of Codalonga on horseback, he makes a turn to his sword after his opponent parries. He turns his sword and strikes with the pommel. And he says, this is the counter to all the plays that come before me. So we know that it's a generally applicable principle. So, step 1, I strike. Step 2, she parries and strikes. Okay. Step 3, as Zoe parries and strikes. Step 3, as Zoe parries and strikes, I enter with a pommel strike, undercover. As Fiore says, I pass with the cover. So let's do this really slowly. I strike, she parries, and my sword is here, in the way of her blow. So I enter in, and my left hand finds her elbow, and I smack her in the face gently. Yeah, can you hear that? Only just. So step 3, I attack, she parries and strikes, and in I go. And I use whatever steps I need to get there, and they will normally look like this. I pass with the cut, I pass in with the parry, and I may very well be a little bit far away here, in which case I step. Only just close enough to get done what I need done. Okay? Now, done a little bit quicker, I don't want you to do it like this. I want you just to see how it works at a bit more speed. Again. Thing is, if you are relaxed, the thing that turns your sword into the parry and pommel strike is your opponent's parry. So this is not about muscling through, it's about yielding to irresistible force, but keeping your way going forwards. So slowly from the other side. Step 1. Step 2. Step 3. Nice and relaxed, nice and easy. Okay? As a left-hander, step 1. Step 2. See, she doesn't care. She just parries and strikes. Step 3. I end up here. Don't forget to strike. Again, step 3. Yeah. Now this is a little bit different. I don't get to the elbow, but I can still certainly strike. Okay? So, practice this, get comfortable with it, and then come back for the last step. Welcome back. Now, your partner attacks. You righteously parry. They enter in with a pommel strike. What are you going to do about it? Well, Fiore loves us and wants us to be happy. Here, the 9th play of the Martial Codalonga on horseback counters the 8th play. And it's a sweet and lovely little thing. Let me show you. So, step by step, Zoe comes to strike. Step 1. Step 2. Step 3. Lovely. Okay. Now, as Zoe comes into pommel strike, all I need to do is turn. And I can pommel strike her instead. Nice and relaxed, nice and easy. There it is. So by this turn, I just take her off my line and I can strike. Once more. There it is. Okay, from the other side. Step 1. Step 3. And step 4. Okay, I want you to really send it into my face. There we go. Yeah. The harder she comes in, the more unstabilized she is, or destabilized she is, when I make that turn. Okay? And it is really as simple as pouring a pint of beer over your shoulder. Not that I would ever recommend you do such a thing. Okay? Now, left-handed against a right-hander, it looks like this. Zoe comes to strike, exactly as before. I parry and strike, exactly as before. She comes into pommel strike. There you go. Good. Now, how do I deal with that? Obviously, the thing that worked before isn't going to work because the pommel strike is coming in on the other side. There are lots of solutions. If I'm left-handed and Zoe is right-handed, as she comes to strike, yeah, 1, 2, I parry and strike as usual, okay, against which she enters with a pommel strike, closing the line of my strike. There we go. Wraps me up with her left arm and smacks me in the face. Okay, now this is different to how it would look if I was right-handed. So the counter was also different. My right hand goes to her sword wrist, and I pull my sword back, and I'm going for a thrust to the guts. You can't really see it from this side, so let's show you from the other side. Slowly all the way through. Step 1. So, step 3, she's going to wrap my arms. She wraps me up and smacks me in the face with the pommel. And I free myself by taking my right hand off and closing the line. Okay. And it's for this kind of close quarters stuff that the dagger material is particularly useful, because Fury doesn't show this kind of defense against a pommel strike specifically, but he shows all of this sort of thing against the dagger. Second drill deals with a mandrillo fendente attack countered by a parry from Dente Jinghiaro, and it continues from there. So, because you already know the first 2 steps, I will show you those again with a slight tweak. You'll practice those, then we'll add step 3, then we'll add step 4. And remember, if this is all too much, feel free to spend weeks, however long it needs to be, on the previous material before you move on. Now, Zoe awaits me in Dente Jinghiaro. I'm in posta di donna. I strike a mandrillo fendente. But as we said before, I don't want you to practice striking and stopping while you're in measure. So from here, pull the cut back, thrust, and cut a reverso mezzano to the head. Okay? So what you're practicing doing is attacking into measure with multiple strikes, smoothly and under control. Okay? Might be a good idea just to practice that by itself. So change sides. I'll just show it to you from the other side, and I'll show it to you left-handed. Mandrillo fendente, thrust, reverso fendente. Okay? And as a left-hander, mandrillo fendente, thrust. Now I don't want to step this way because of that sword there. Okay? So my reverso fendente is a little awkward. Mandrillo fendente, thrust, bringing that sword behind you, and just get out of measure. okay? Because you're wrong-footed to keep going in that direction. So, mandrel fendente, thrust, and that blow gets me out of measure, okay? Which kind of keeps her away from me while I'm getting back to safety. So, go practice these. Oh yes, welcome back. Zoe awaits me dente Jingaro. So step 1, I strike 3 times. Step 2, she parries and strikes. Dave? Okay. Okay, and from the other side. Left-handers. Step 1. Step 2, she parries and strikes, exactly as before. Okay? This is familiar stuff. Go practice it. Welcome back. Now, my counter to her defense must include a cover against her strike, because she must, as she parries, be returning with a blow. So, step 1. So far, so good. Step 2, she parries and strikes. Now, step 3, my sword turns. Her beating my weapon away turns my sword. Okay? And I enter in over her arms, I catch her elbow, and I bring it to me. And then I smack her in the face with the pommel. Now, we ought to be going in with the point here. And you see, if my sword is the correct length, I can reach. But I don't like beginners using points one-handed without much protection on at this stage. So for now, we'll content ourselves with a pommel strike. Okay? Boom. Other side. Same thing from the other side. Looks like this. Okay? Notice that I've caught her elbow. Okay, that's the trick to it. And again, I go through all these joint locks on the dagger course. There isn't really the time and the space to do it on the longsword course, or the longsword course would end up being like vastly too big. So, cross-handed. If I'm left-handed, how do I do that same thing? The answer is I don't really, because I'm on the other side. So I attack and she parries. I cover the blow and I enter in controlling the sword and I pommel strike like first drill for right-handers, or first drill for a same-handed pair. Okay? So let's have a quick look at that again. I attack, she parries, I cover it, I close that line, and I smack her in the face with the pommel. Okay? So, get on and practice that. Cheerio. Welcome back. Now, the counter to that ghastly wrap goes like this. Let's do this step by step. Step 1, Zoe comes to strike. Step 2, I parry and strike. Step 3, she enters with the wrap. And notice if she catches my elbow, it takes my hip away from me and I'm stuck. Okay? Now, step 4, go really slowly. The trick to it here, I turn my pommel away from me. Okay, that changes the position of my elbow. I catch her elbow with my hand and I pull that elbow towards me. And I end up here. And I get this foot out of the way in etude a volta. Sword over there, please. Or I have to break her arm. Okay, and we end up here. This is nasty. Okay, so be gentle with your friends. Again, slowly. Okay. And the other side. Step 2. Step 3. Gentlest to wrap. Now step 4. I catch that elbow and I gently break the arm. Slowly. Okay, the trick is that turn at this point. Turn the pommel away from you. Okay, and that gets the elbow where you want it, and you gently pull it in. Okay, be very careful, this is an arm break. Now, the cross-handed version is similar to first drill. All right, step 1, she comes to strike. Okay, step 2, I parry and strike. Step 3. There we go. Okay, and my counter to that is really simple. I get out of the way, just like before. Okay, make sense? Let's hope so. Okay, practice this. I'll see you in a minute. Welcome back. Now, that's the end of the 4th section of the course. I want you to practice all of this until it is comfortable before you move on. You've heard me say that before, and that's because the most common problem afflicting most martial artists is they want to get on to the next bit before they've mastered the basics. The thing is, if you take your time and you get comfortable with it, you will progress much further, much faster. So, I will see you on the next section when you are ready for it. See you then.